You're driving through the rolling, impossibly green hills of the English countryside, a landscape so picturesque it feels less like reality and more like a painting from a forgotten storybook. The road, once a modern motorway, narrows, becoming a winding country lane flanked by ancient woodlands. The branches of oak and beech trees, heavy with the green of an English summer, form a canopy overhead, dappling the asphalt in shifting patterns of light and shadow. There's a sense of anticipation, of leaving the modern world behind and journeying back in time. And then, just as you've settled into the gentle rhythm of the drive, the trees part, like a curtain rising on a grand stage. And there it is, a silhouette so familiar. It feels like a memory you never made. A golden stone colossus, its towers and turrets reaching for the clouds, a defiant statement of power and permanence against the soft, often gray Hampshire sky. Highclere Castle. It sits there, majestic and timeless, as if it has always been there and always will be. The stone glows in the afternoon light, warm and inviting. The grounds stretch out in every direction, perfectly manicured lawns giving way to ancient parkland. It's the kind of place that makes you believe in the permanence of the past, in the idea that some things are simply too magnificent to ever fall. For millions around the globe, this is Downton Abbey, a place of fictional drama, of aristocratic lives lived on a scale we can barely comprehend, of butlers polishing silver until it gleams like mirrors and grand ladies in rustling silk descending sweeping oak staircases. It's a symbol of a bygone era, an age of unimaginable wealth, unshakable stability, and unquestioned order. It is the quintessential English country house, an embodiment of a nation's identity and a fantasy of its past. The show has captivated audiences worldwide, winning countless awards and spawning films that continue the saga. But what if I told you that this magnificent facade, this icon of British heritage that seems as solid as the very earth it's built on, is in fact a story of crushing debt, quiet desperation, and a century-long battle for survival? Let's talk numbers for a moment, because the reality of Highclere is hidden in its staggering, almost unbelievable statistics. The estate sprawls across 5,000 acres. That's nearly 8 square miles of manicured parkland, dense woodland, and working farmland. To put that in perspective, you could fit the entire country of Monaco into this estate 4 times over, with room to spare. The castle itself boasts somewhere between 250 and 300 rooms. Let that sink in. 300 rooms. Most of us live in homes with a handful of rooms. This is a private home with the scale of a grand hotel, a labyrinth of staterooms, drawing rooms, music rooms, smoking rooms, bedrooms beyond counting, and a vast, unseen network of servants' quarters, corridors, and kitchens that form the engine of the house. Now, imagine being handed a bill for its upkeep. In 2009, the family living within its walls was facing a repair bill of nearly £12 million. That's about $18 million at the time. That's not the value of the house, that's just the cost to fix it, and the urgent can't wait another day repairs to stop the rain from pouring in and the towers from crumbling. A cool $1.8 million, this wasn't a new problem. This was a century-old crisis reaching its breaking point, a slow-motion financial catastrophe that had been gathering momentum since the end of the First World War. The story of Highclere Castle isn't just the story of a beautiful building. It's the story of a family's relentless, generation-spanning battle to simply keep the roof from caving in. It's a story of unimaginable privilege colliding with the brutal, unforgiving reality of economics. It's a drama more compelling and more fraught with peril than anything a scriptwriter could invent. So the central mystery is this: how did this symbol of aristocratic power and wealth, a house built to project an image of eternal stability, come so close to ruin, not once, but twice in 100 years? And how, in its darkest hour, when all traditional solutions had failed, was it saved not by an inheritance or a wealthy marriage, but by the most unlikely of heroes, a television show? To answer those questions, we need to look past the fictional characters of Downton Abbey, past the glamour and the drama, and meet the real family who call this magnificent and terrifyingly expensive house their home. To understand the drama of Highclere, you have to understand the family at its heart, the Herbert family, the Earls of Carnarvon. The title itself dates back to 1628, when the first Earl was created by King Charles VII. The Carnarvons have been part of English history for nearly 4 centuries, their names appearing in the records of Parliament, in the annals of war, and in the great events that shaped the nation. They were not merely wealthy, they were woven into the very fabric of the British establishment. They've lived here since 1679. That's not a typo. For over 340 years, this single family has been the custodian of this land. To put this in perspective, the Carnarvons have owned Highclere for longer than the United States has existed as a nation. They have seen empires rise and fall. They have witnessed the transformation of Britain from a feudal society to a global superpower. They have survived wars, revolutions, and economic upheavals. And through it all, they have maintained their connection to this place, this house, this estate. They were here before the United States of America was even a country. They were here during the English Civil War, during the Industrial Revolution, during the rise and fall of the British Empire. They witnessed the transformation of Britain from an agricultural society to an industrial powerhouse, and then to a post-industrial nation. Through all of it, they maintained their grip on Highclere. The castle you see today, the one we recognize as Downton Abbey, is largely the creation of the 3rd Earl of Carnarvon. In the 1840s, he hired Sir Charles Barry, the architectural star of the era, who was simultaneously rebuilding the Houses of Parliament in London, to transform the existing, more modest Georgian house into the high Victorian, Italianate-style palace we see today. Barry was at the height of his powers, fresh from his triumph with the Palace of Westminster. He was the most sought-after architect in England, and the 3rd Earl spared no expense to secure his services. Barry didn't hold back. He wrapped the original house in a new skin of bathstone, adding the soaring towers and ornate carvings that give the castle its distinctive, dramatic silhouette. It was a statement. In an age of industrial revolution and new money, this was old aristocracy reminding the world of its enduring power and taste. The interiors were just as lavish, filled with priceless art, furniture, and a library containing nearly 6,000 books. This wasn't just a home, it was a declaration of status, a private kingdom built to entertain royalty and project an image of effortless grandeur. But here's the first secret of these great houses. They are designed to look effortless, but they are anything but. They are ravenous beasts, constantly demanding to be fed. The sheer logistics of running a place like Highclere in its heyday are staggering. You're talking about an army of staff, butlers, under-butlers, footmen, valets, ladies' maids, housekeepers, cooks, scullery maids, groundskeepers, grooms. The list goes on and on. These weren't just employees. They were a community, a human engine that kept the great house running. And they all needed to be housed, fed, and paid. The servants' wing alone was like a small village, with its own hierarchy, its own rules, and its own complex social structure. The cost of simply heating a place like this, with its vast high-ceilinged rooms and single-glazed windows, was astronomical. In the winter, the castle would be bitterly cold despite the fires roaring in every fireplace. The maintenance is a never-ending cycle. The roof alone is a battlefield of its own, constantly under assault from the English weather. The stone crumbles, the windows leak, the plumbing groans. It's a war of attrition against time and decay, and it costs a fortune. For generations, the Carnarvons, like other aristocratic families, could afford it. Their wealth wasn't in cash, it was in land. The vast estate, farmed by tenant farmers, generated the income that fueled the lifestyle. It was a system that had worked for centuries, but the world was changing. The late 19th and early 20th centuries brought agricultural depressions, new taxes, and a fundamental shift in the economic landscape. The old certainties were beginning to crumble. The agricultural depression of the 1870s and 1880s had already begun to erode the wealth of landed families. Cheap grain from America flooded British markets, making it impossible for English farmers to compete. The income from the estates fell dramatically. At the same time, new taxation policies were introduced that targeted the wealthy. Death duties, in particular, became increasingly onerous. The traditional model of aristocratic wealth was breaking down. And that brings us to the man who would find himself at the center of the first great crisis, a man whose name would become famous for a discovery that would echo through history, but whose private life was a constant struggle against the financial tide. George Herbert, the 5th Earl of Carnarvon. He was born in 1866 and inherited the earldom in 1890 at the age of 24. He was a man of his era, educated at Eton and Cambridge, trained in the traditions of the English aristocracy. But he was also a man of vision and imagination, willing to pursue his passions regardless of the cost or the consequences. The 5th Earl was, by all accounts, a man of his time. An adventurer, a pioneer of motoring, he was one of the first and most reckless drivers in England, and a passionate amateur Egyptologist. He was a man who lived life at full throttle, seemingly unafraid of the consequences. In 1901, he suffered a serious motoring accident near Bad Schwalbach in Germany that left him significantly injured. Yet, even this near-fatal brush with death couldn't dampen his passion for speed and adventure. He inherited an estate that was already feeling the pinch. The agricultural income was no longer what it once was. Prevented by the strict social codes of his class from simply going out and earning money in business, he was left with the one solution available to an impoverished aristocrat. He had to marry money. This wasn't considered shameful. It was simply how the aristocracy adapted to changing circumstances. Wealthy industrialists and banking families were eager to marry their daughters into the aristocracy, and the aristocracy was equally eager to marry into their money. It was a transaction dressed up in the language of romance, and he did. In 1895, he married Almina Wombwell, the beautiful and vivacious illegitimate daughter of Alfred de Rothschild of the legendary banking family. The arrangement was brutally transactional, as so many aristocratic marriages of the era were. The Rothschilds provided Almina with a dowry of staggering proportions, $500,000. In today's money, that's a sum so vast it's difficult to calculate, but it would be well in excess of $60 million. It was this injection of cash that kept Highclere afloat. It paid for the lavish parties, the staff, the maintenance, and, crucially, it funded the Earl's expensive passion, his search for a lost pharaoh's tomb in Egypt's Valley of the Kings. Almina herself was an extraordinary woman. Despite her illegitimate birth, which would have been a social stigma at the time, she became one of the most influential women in English society. She was intelligent, cultured, and possessed of a strong sense of duty and responsibility. She would become a nurse, a philanthropist, and a devoted custodian of Highclere Castle. For years, Lord Carnarvon poured his wife's fortune into the dusty sands of Egypt, backing the determined and often luckless archaeologist Howard Carter. It was a huge gamble, a speculative venture that consumed vast sums of money with no guarantee of return. Carter had been searching for years with little success. The Valley of the Kings was thought to be exhausted, picked clean by grave robbers and previous excavators. But Carnarvon believed in Carter's vision, and he was willing to spend whatever it took. Carnarvon would spend his winters in Egypt, living in luxury camps while Carter and his team excavated in the scorching heat. The two men became close friends, bound by their shared obsession with uncovering the secrets of ancient Egypt. Carnarvon was not merely a patron, he was an active participant in the excavations, learning the techniques of archaeology and contributing his own insights. For Carnarvon, it was the adventure of a lifetime, a chance to make a mark on history that transcended the mere accumulation of wealth. Back at Highclere, Almina turned the castle into a hospital for wounded officers during the First World War, further cementing the family's place in the fabric of the nation. She worked tirelessly, transforming the grand state rooms into wards and recovery rooms. The castle became a place of healing, a sanctuary for the broken bodies and shattered minds of the Great War. Almina was tireless in her efforts, often working 16-hour days. She became a trained nurse and was beloved by the soldiers who recovered under her care. But the war would change everything. It swept away the old world order, and with it, the economic foundations of houses like Highclere. And for the 5th Earl, time was running out in more ways than one. In November 1922, after years of fruitless searching and with Carnarvon's funds nearly exhausted, Howard Carter made the discovery of a lifetime. he found the steps leading down to the sealed tomb of the boy king Tutankhamun. The story is legendary. Carnarvon rushed to Egypt to be there for the opening. When Carter made a small hole in the doorway and peered in, Carnarvon asked, "Can you see anything?" Carter's famous reply, "Yes, wonderful things." The discovery made the 5th Earl of Carnarvon one of the most famous men in the world. He was the man who had funded the greatest archaeological find in history. Newspapers across the globe ran his photograph. He was invited to lecture halls and universities. The Times of London devoted pages to the story. It was the biggest news story of the age. It should have been his ultimate triumph, but fate had a cruel twist in store. Just a few months later, in April 1923, Lord Carnarvon died in Cairo. A mosquito bite on his cheek, accidentally slashed while shaving, became infected, and he succumbed to blood poisoning and pneumonia. He was just 56 years old. The world was captivated by the curse of the pharaohs, the popular belief that Tutankhamun's tomb carried a supernatural curse that struck down those who disturbed it. Newspapers ran sensational headlines about the curse. Lord Carnarvon became the most famous victim of the alleged curse. But back in England, a far more practical and devastating curse was about to be unleashed upon his family: the British inheritance tax, then known as death duties. This is where the story of grandeur takes a sharp, terrifying turn into the world of cold, hard bureaucracy. The British government, itself effectively bankrupt after the immense cost of the First World War, was looking for revenue wherever it could find it, and the vast landed estates of the aristocracy were a prime target. The death of a peer triggered a massive tax bill calculated on the total value of their estate: the land, the house, the art, everything. The bill that landed on the desk of the new 6th Earl of Carnarvon, a man known as Porchy, was for $500,000. It's the same number as Almina's original dowry, but this time it wasn't an injection of cash, but a demand for it. £500,000 in 1923. To understand the scale of this, you have to think in today's terms. Direct conversions are tricky, but financial historians estimate that bill would be the equivalent of somewhere between 30 million and 40 million today. It was a cataclysmic sum. The young Earl, who had just inherited one of England's greatest houses, now found himself facing a bill that would bankrupt most families. He had no choice but to pay it. The government would not negotiate, would not extend credit, would not wait. The law was clear and merciless. And here's the rub. The Carnarvons, like most of the aristocracy, were asset-rich but cash-poor. Their wealth was the estate itself. They didn't have 30 million sitting in a bank account. To pay the bill, they would have to sell. But what? Selling off parcels of the 5,000-acre estate was a slow process, and the agricultural land market was depressed. It wouldn't raise the cash fast enough. The situation was made worse by the fact that the 5th Earl had left significant debts. His Egyptian expeditions, while ultimately successful in archaeological terms, had been financially ruinous. He'd spent far more than he had anticipated, and the family was left to deal with the consequences. The government wasn't sympathetic. The tax had to be paid. This was a crisis that was playing out across the country. Great houses were being abandoned, their contents sold off, their roofs left to rot. An entire way of life was being dismantled, not by revolution, but by taxation. For the 6th Earl, the magnificent castle he had just inherited was no longer a home. It was a liability, a £500,000 weight around his neck. He was a young man, thrust into a position of enormous responsibility and facing an impossible financial situation. The weight of centuries of family history rested on his shoulders. He was faced with a horrifying choice. He could let the government seize the estate, the home his family had held for over 3 centuries. Or he could perform the ultimate act of aristocratic sacrifice. He could begin to sell the treasures that filled it. The wonderful things his father had just discovered in a tomb in Egypt were now ironically mirrored by the wonderful things he would have to sell from his own home to survive. The situation was made even more complicated by the 5th Earl's will. He had left a complex and messy financial situation. And the treasures from Tutankhamun's tomb, they were legally the property of the Egyptian government. There was no fortune to be made there. In fact, The fifth Earl had died in debt to the tune of hundreds of thousands of pounds on top of the death duties. The family was facing total ruin. The stage was set for a desperate act, a sale that would be remembered as one of the most significant art auctions of the 20th century. The family had to raise an astronomical amount of cash, and they had to do it quickly. The very survival of Highclere Castle hung in the balance. Faced with the crippling death duties, the sixth Earl of Carnarvon and his mother Almina had to make a decision that would have been unthinkable to their ancestors. They had to open up their home, not to guests, but to valuers. They had to put a price on their history. The process began of cataloging the contents of Highclere, identifying the most valuable items that could be sacrificed to save the whole. Imagine the emotional toll, walking through the rooms of your childhood home, the familiar paintings on the walls, the furniture you've known your whole life, and seeing them not as part of your home, but as assets to be liquidated. A Titian here, a Van Dyck there, each one a piece of the family's history, a memory, now reduced to a number on a ledger. The valuers would come in with their clipboards and their cold professional assessments. This Gainsborough, $50,000. This tapestry, $15,000. This pearl necklace, $8,000. It was heartbreaking. The result was what became known as the sale of the century. In 1926, a vast collection of Highclere's treasures was sent to the auction house Christie's in London. The catalogue itself was a testament to the quality of the collection the family had amassed over generations. There were paintings by Gainsborough and Reynolds, priceless tapestries, exquisite French furniture, and a pearl necklace that was a family heirloom. The Earl of Porchester, the sixth Earl, and his wife Catherine had to watch as their inheritance was sold off to the highest bidder. It was a public dismantling of a private world. The newspapers of the day reported on it with a mixture of awe and pity. It was the end of an era, played out in the full glare of the public eye. The sale lasted for weeks. Collectors and museums from around the world sent representatives to bid. The prices were extraordinary, but it worked. The sale raised the necessary funds, the tax bill was paid, Highclere Castle was saved, but it came at a tremendous cost. The house was emptier, its collections depleted. It was a shadow of its former self. The loss was not merely financial, it was emotional, cultural, and deeply personal. The paintings that had hung on the walls for generations, the furniture that had been part of the family's daily life, the objects that had been collected over centuries, all of it was gone. The walls of Highclere, once covered with masterpieces, were now bare. The rooms that had been filled with beauty and history were now empty and echoing. It was a devastating blow to the family's sense of identity and continuity. And the financial pressures didn't just disappear. The underlying problem, that the estate's income could no longer support the immense running costs of the house, remained. The family had to adapt. They downsized the staff. Parts of the house were closed off, left to gather dust. The grand lifestyle depicted in shows like Downton Abbey was, for the real inhabitants of Highclere, becoming a distant memory. This was the new reality for much of the British aristocracy in the mid-20th century. The story repeated itself across the country. Some families gave up entirely, selling their estates to property developers or handing them over to the National Trust, a conservation charity. Others, like the Carnarvons, clung on, finding new ways to generate income. They opened their homes to the public for a few shillings a ticket, hosting weddings and corporate events. They became entrepreneurs out of necessity. The transformation was profound. The great houses that had been symbols of private wealth and power were now becoming public institutions. The families that owned them were no longer simply living their lives, they were performing their lives for an audience of paying visitors. It was a strange and often uncomfortable position to be in, but it was also, in many cases, the only way to survive. The Carnarvons, like many other aristocratic families, had to learn to see their home not as a private sanctuary, but as a business asset, a source of income that was essential to their survival. The sixth Earl and his wife, Catherine, managed to navigate this difficult new world. Catherine, an American, was rumored to have had 13 proposals of marriage, a testament to her beauty and charm. She brought a new energy to the house, and together they managed to keep Highclere going through the Second World War and the austere post-war years. They still entertained, but on a smaller, more manageable scale. Royalty still visited, but the days of employing an army of servants were long gone. The transformation was profound. What had once been a house that required dozens of servants to maintain was now being run by a much smaller staff. The family themselves had to become involved in the day-to-day running of the house in ways that would have been unthinkable to their ancestors. But they adapted. They had to. The alternative was to lose everything. But the house itself continued its slow, relentless process of decay. The fundamental problem with a building of this size and age is that the repairs are never, ever finished. It's like painting the fourth bridge. By the time you get to the end, it's time to start again at the beginning. And the costs only ever go in one direction, up. The stone deteriorates, the lead flashing on the roof corrodes, the ancient plumbing fails, the electrical systems become dangerous. Each generation of Carnarvons had to make difficult choices about which repairs were most urgent. By the time the current Earl, the 8th Earl of Carnarvon, and his wife Lady Fiona took over, the situation had become critical once again. They were living in a house that was, in parts, becoming derelict. The magnificent stone towers designed by Sir Charles Barry were crumbling. Water was getting in. The ornate plasterwork ceilings were threatened. The sheer scale of the necessary repairs was overwhelming. They were facing a new kind of crisis. Not a single cataclysmic tax bill, but a slow, creeping decay that threatened to consume the house from within. They were the custodians of a national treasure, but they were largely on their own. The romance of living in a castle was colliding with the cold, damp reality of leaking roofs and astronomical heating bills. The cost of running Highclere was estimated at around $1 million per year just to keep it standing. That's roughly $1.3 million in US dollars every single year, just to maintain the status quo. It was unsustainable. Lady Fiona Carnarvon, an American by birth, had married into this situation with her eyes open. She understood the challenges, but she was determined not to let the house fall. She and the Earl tried everything they could think of. They opened the castle to the public on certain days, charging admission. They hosted corporate events and private functions. They rented rooms for film and television productions. They even considered selling off more land. But none of it was enough. The gap between income and expenses kept growing wider. The situation was particularly acute because of the nature of the building itself. Highclere is not a modern structure that can be easily maintained. It is a Victorian creation, built with the assumption that it would be maintained by a large staff of skilled workers. The plumbing is ancient and temperamental. The electrical systems are outdated and dangerous. The heating system is inefficient and expensive. The roof, which covers an enormous area, requires constant attention. The stone, which is beautiful but porous, is constantly under attack from the English weather. Every winter brings new damage. Every spring brings new repair bills. The family was caught in a trap. They could not afford to fix the house, but they could not afford to abandon it either. To walk away would be to betray centuries of family history and to lose a piece of England's cultural heritage. By the 2000s, the 8th Earl and Countess of Carnarvon were fighting a losing battle. A 2009 newspaper article showed Lord Carnarvon posing in rooms where the wallpaper was peeling off in huge sheets, the plaster was crumbling, and the dark stains of mold were creeping across the walls. The romantic image of the English stately home was a world away from this grim reality. These were rooms that had once hosted royalty, that had been the setting for grand balls and intimate dinners. Now they were falling apart. The photographs were shocking. They showed a man standing in what should have been one of the finest rooms in England, surrounded by decay and neglect. It was a stark and powerful image, a visual representation of the family's desperation. The numbers were, once again, terrifying. The family was facing a total repair bill estimated at nearly $12 million. At least $1.8 million of that was for work that was critically urgent. 50 rooms in the castle were uninhabitable. The main stone towers were in such a state of disrepair that there was a real danger of them collapsing. The family was living in a grand, crumbling ruin. Lord Carnarvon spoke openly about the possibility of having to abandon the castle, to shut it up and walk away. It was a prospect that had been unthinkable for 300 years, but it was now a very real possibility. The traditional sources of income were no longer enough. The revenue from farming, from small-scale tourism, from hosting weddings, it was a drop in the ocean compared to the millions needed to save the building. And then, just as the situation seemed most hopeless, the global financial crisis of 2008 hit. As Lord Carnarvon himself said, "It was just after the banking crisis, and it was gloom in all directions. We had been doing corporate functions, but it all became pretty sparse after that. The corporate events, a vital lifeline, dried up. The world's economy was in free fall, and for Highclere Castle, the timing couldn't have been worse. This is the desperation at the heart of this story. The family was trapped. They were the owners of one of England's most beautiful houses, but they were also its prisoners. They couldn't afford to fix it, but they couldn't afford to let it fall down either. They were pouring every penny they had into a building that was consuming money faster than they could earn it. The bottom line, as Lady Carnarvon admitted, was quite thin. They tried everything. They explored new business ventures. They looked for government grants, but the heritage funds were stretched thin. They were in a race against time, and they were losing. The story of Highclere was becoming a story of managed decline, a slow slide towards dereliction. It's a story that's hard for many of us to sympathize with at first glance. The idea of an Earl living in a 250-room castle having money worries seems absurd, but the reality is that these houses are more like national monuments than private homes. The costs of their upkeep are on a scale that is almost impossible for a private family, no matter how wealthy, to sustain in the modern world. As Lady Carnarvon put it, perhaps in the past an estate and house defined and supported the family and their lifestyle, but today it is quite the reverse. The challenge is how Geordie and I seek to support and look after Highclere. And then, in 2009, a letter arrived. It was from a television production company. They were looking for a location for a new period drama written by Julian Fellowes, an Oscar-winning writer who was himself the son of a diplomat and married into the aristocracy. He knew this world. The show was to be called Downton Abbey. The Carnarvons had been approached by film crews before. Highclere had been used in films like Eyes Wide Shut and King Ralph. But this was different. This was a multi-part television series. It would mean turning their home into a film set for months on end. It would be disruptive, chaotic, and there was no guarantee the show would even be a success. The production would require extensive use of the staterooms, the kitchens, and the grounds. Crews would be everywhere. The family would have to adapt their daily life to accommodate the needs of the production, but they were out of options. They needed the money. They agreed. They had no idea that they were about to embark on what Lady Carnarvon would later call an amazing magic carpet ride. They thought they were just getting a location fee that would help patch up a few more leaks in the roof. They had no idea they were about to welcome a phenomenon that would not only save their home, but transform its future forever. The decision to allow the filming was made almost out of desperation, but it would prove to be the most important decision the family had made in a century. When the first series of Downton Abbey aired in the UK in 2010, no one, not the producers, not the actors, and certainly not the Carnarvons, could have predicted the scale of what was about to happen. It was an instant, massive hit. The public fell in love with the story of the Crawley family and their servants, a story of love, loss, and social change, all set against the backdrop of the magnificent castle. The show premiered on ITV to critical acclaim and immediately became a cultural phenomenon. Within weeks, it was the most watched program on British television. Critics praised its writing, its acting, and its authentic portrayal of the period. It was soon sold to broadcasters around the world. And that castle, it wasn't just a backdrop. As ITV's director of television, Peter Fincham, said, "The castle has been one enormous character as well. Viewers were captivated by its grandeur, and they wanted to see it for themselves. The castle became as much a star of the show as the actors. People who had never heard of Highclere before suddenly wanted to visit it. The fictional world of Downton Abbey had made the real Highclere Castle famous. The effect on Highclere was immediate and overwhelming. The phone started ringing off the hook. The website crashed. The trickle of visitors turned into a flood. Before Downton, Highclere was a relatively minor tourist attraction. After Downton, it became a global pilgrimage site. Visitor numbers doubled, to one alone 200 people a day. The formerly basic ticketing system had to be replaced with a computerized advanced booking system to cope with the demand from international tourists. The castle, which had been open to the public for only a few weeks each year, had to expand its hours dramatically. The gift shop, which had previously sold a few postcards and guidebooks, had to be completely reorganized to handle the volume of visitors. The tea room, which had served a handful of guests, had to expand significantly. It was overwhelming, but it was also exhilarating. For the first time in decades, there was hope. The family had to hire more staff to manage the visitors, to maintain the castle in the face of increased use, to run the gift shop and the tea room. But these were good problems to have. These were the problems of success, not failure. The revenue was flowing in, and it was flowing directly into the restoration of the house. This was the Downton effect. The show was sold to countries around the world, eventually being broadcast in 250 territories, and wherever it went, it acted as a giant glossy advertisement for Highclere Castle. Visit Britain, the national tourism agency, estimated that nearly a third of all foreign visitors to the UK include a castle or historic house on their itinerary. Downton Abbey had put Highclere at the very top of that list. The revenue from this explosion in tourism was a game changer. It was the lifeline the Carnarvons had been praying for. The money from ticket sales, from the gift shop, from the tea rooms, it all went straight back into the house. As Lady Carnarvon said, "It has allowed us to spend faster on the buildings, have the follies restored." The rolling program of repairs that had seemed so impossible just a few years earlier was now underway. The derelict tower rooms, silent and empty for decades, were restored. The grand Roman-style archway, the London Lodge, was transformed into a holiday cottage. The crumbling stonework was repaired. The leaking roofs were made watertight. The house was being brought back from the brink, one tourist ticket at a time. The restoration work was meticulous and expensive, but it was finally possible. The family could afford to hire the best craftspeople, the most skilled stonemasons, the most experienced roof specialists. The work was done properly, with attention to historical detail and architectural integrity. Rooms that had been closed for decades were carefully restored to their former glory. The process was slow and painstaking, but it was working. Gareth Neame, the show's executive producer, put it simply, "I think Downton Abbey secured Highclere's future. It's a statement that captures the profound impact that the television show has had on the castle and the family that calls it home. Without Downton Abbey, Highclere would likely have continued its slow decline into ruin. With it, the castle has been given a new purpose, a new lease on life, and a sustainable future. It's a remarkable story. A piece of popular culture, a television soap opera, succeeded where generations of aristocratic ingenuity had struggled. It found a sustainable economic model for a 21st century stately home. It turned a liability into a thriving business. The financial model is elegant in its simplicity. Visitors pay admission to tour the castle. They buy souvenirs in the gift shop. They have tea in the tea room. They attend special events and themed tours. The revenue from all of these activities is reinvested in the maintenance and restoration of the house. It is a virtuous cycle, a positive feedback loop. The more visitors come, the more money is available for repairs. The more repairs are done, the more impressive the castle becomes, and the more visitors want to come. The Downton Abbey effect has been transformative. What was a desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort to generate some income, has become the foundation of a thriving business model that ensures the castle's survival for generations to come. The television show has done what centuries of tradition, what careful management, what strategic marriages could not do. It has made Highclere economically viable in the modern world. Today, Highclere is more than just a house, it's a brand. Lady Carnarvon has written successful books about the real history of the castle and the women who lived there. They host special events, concerts, and themed tours. They have embraced the Downton phenomenon, understanding that it is the key to the long-term survival of the estate. The castle has become a destination in its own right, independent of the television show. People come not just because of Downton Abbey, but because they want to experience the real Highclere, to walk the same halls as the fictional characters, to see the real rooms where the scenes were filmed. The castle now attracts over 200,000 visitors per year, generating millions of pounds in revenue. This income has allowed the Carnarvons to undertake restoration projects that would have been impossible just a few years ago. The castle is being brought back to life, room by room, stone by stone, but they are also acutely aware that the magic carpet ride won't last forever. The show has ended, though the films have continued the story. But tastes change. As Lady Carnarvon says, "What you do is never sit on your laurels. Every single day, don't take anything for granted." The family understands that they must continue to innovate, to find new ways to attract visitors and generate revenue. They are exploring new ventures, new experiences, new ways to share their home with the world. They are thinking about the long term, about how to ensure that Highclere remains viable for future generations. The challenge is to maintain the castle's authenticity and historical integrity while also making it relevant and appealing to modern visitors. They are developing new exhibitions, hosting conferences and corporate events, and exploring digital platforms to reach a wider audience. The castle is not resting on its laurels. It is constantly evolving, constantly finding new ways to engage with the world while remaining true to its heritage and history. The story of Highclere Castle is a microcosm of the story of the British aristocracy over the last century. It's a story of decline, of adaptation, and of survival. It's a story of how these great houses, once the private domains of a tiny privileged elite, have had to find a new purpose in a democratic world. They have had to become tourist attractions, film sets, wedding venues, and brands. They have had to learn to sell their own history in order to survive. Highclere is not unique in this regard. Across England and the world, great houses have faced similar challenges and have had to find similar solutions. Some have succeeded, like Highclere. Others have failed, their grand facades now crumbling into ruin, their contents scattered to the winds. The difference often comes down to luck, timing, and the willingness of the family to adapt and innovate. The Carnarvons have been fortunate. They had the foresight to allow the filming of Downton Abbey, and they have had the intelligence and determination to capitalize on the opportunity that the show's success has provided. So the next time you see that iconic silhouette, whether in a film or on a postcard, remember the real story. Remember the crushing weight of the 500,000 tax bill, the desperate sale of family treasures, the crumbling walls and the leaking roofs. And remember the unlikely television show that came along in the nick of time and gave this magnificent house a future. The real drama of Downton Abbey isn't about who marries whom or the scandal of the week. It's the quiet, century-long battle for survival fought by one family against the relentless forces of time and economics to save the house they call home. It is a story that speaks to something deep in the human spirit, the desire to preserve beauty, to maintain continuity with the past, to pass something of value on to future generations. It is a story of resilience in the face of overwhelming odds, of creativity and innovation in the face of crisis. It is a story that reminds us that even in the darkest moments, when all seems lost, salvation can come from the most unexpected places. And it is a story that is still being written as the Carnarvons continue their work to preserve and maintain this extraordinary piece of British heritage for generations to come. Highclere Castle stands today as a testament to the power of adaptation and resilience. It is no longer just a private home. It is a working business, a tourist attraction, a film set, and a symbol of British heritage. The Carnarvons have learned to embrace their role as custodians not just of a building, but of a piece of history that belongs to the world. The castle that nearly fell into ruin has been given a new lease on life, not by royal decree or government intervention, but by the simple fact that millions of people around the world fell in love with a television show. The Downton Abbey phenomenon has allowed the family to invest millions in the restoration and preservation of the house. Rooms that had been closed for decades have been reopened, the gardens have been restored, the grounds have been improved. The castle is no longer slowly dying, it is being brought back to life. But the story of Highclere is also a cautionary tale. It reminds us that even the greatest monuments are fragile, that wealth and status are not permanent, that the future is never guaranteed, no matter how secure the present may seem. And it reminds us that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. The Carnarvons know that they must continue to innovate, to adapt, and to find new ways to generate revenue from their extraordinary home. The television show may not last forever. Tastes may change. New attractions may draw visitors away. But for now, Downton Abbey has given them a chance, a reprieve, a future, and they are determined to make the most of it. The story of Highclere is ultimately a story of hope, of the possibility of redemption, of the triumph of human ingenuity and determination over seemingly impossible odds. It is a story that deserves to be told and remembered, not just as a footnote to a popular television show, but as a testament to the enduring power of beauty, history, and human perseverance.